Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I hope to provide a measured contribution. I think James Kelly, Presiding Officer, may have been slightly unwise in going into IT projects. I merely direct him at Labour's NHS England project, £12 billion abandoned. We can do a great deal better in Scotland, and we always do. Now, what I did do in preparing for this debate was, of course, to scrutinise the motion that's before the House, and it's more startling for its omission rather than commission. Omission, that is, of any amendment to the motion before us. So we can expect the Labour Party, most vocal in the band, least visible in identifying action, to vote for, of necessity, to the unamended motion before us, thus endorsing all within it. Or, should we see an abstention or outright opposition, thus seeking to disrupt funding for health, for transport, for education, for local government, because I am a little more optimistic than my colleague Kenny Gibson. Although Mystic Meg probably has a more sensible idea of what is going to happen. I'm encouraged by Ken Gibson's opening remarks. He said more unites us than divides us. So I'm going to lay my money on the idea that they will ultimately decide that the Finance Secretary has brought forward a motion, a budget, which is worthy of support. The whole issue I raise is a matter of parliamentary process and rules. Credibility sought through debate absolutely falls to naught if it's not pursued by every means available. Government budgets are never, I'm sure, produced without vigorous internal debate, keen external scrutiny, and, where required, counter-proposals tabled, debated and decided. Somewhat missing from this debate, except in certain respects, so far. And don't imagine that finance ministers get their own way all the time. We previously saw Parliament reject and then accept our finance minister's proposals. Internally, I'm going to quote from Cabinet minutes to show it can be no easier there on occasion. The Finance Secretary's alarm can be put to one side because the example I quote from, which saw the Finance Minister have to ask, and I quote, that his dissent be recorded to the decision in Cabinet. My example does, however, come from the 8th of May 1919, and the Chancellor was Austin Chamberlain. I'm delighted that the successful proposition, which was on RAF officer pay, came from my father's cousin, James Stevenson, who was attending Cabinet. I can assure those who have not seen me at Cabinet that I, of course, was always impeccably behaved and supported the Finance Secretary because he is always supportable. The occasional glimpse of Labour's agenda can be seen with those with infrared eyes, those who peer into the murky undergrowth. Ken Macintosh has talked about using underspend. Well, of course, the Labour Party has in government a very long history of building up huge underspends, an issue which the SNP government had to confront in the first session. Secondly, savings. Ken Macintosh, in particular, has said savings can be a help here. Well, of course, we're moving from a position of measuring the input to what we do to looking at the value we deliver. And I cite one example which is drawn from transport, of where the partnership between Transport Scotland and Network Rail has actually delivered exactly in the way that is desired on this government's watch. And that's the Paisley Canal project, where the original budget was £28 million. That project was actually delivered on time for £12 million. And that's the approach that this government will take. Not so much cutting the output as looking at getting effective use of the input. Yes, I shall.
Ken Macintosh.
Can I ask Mr Stevenson how, by cutting the e-group programme, he has delivered on his promises to the commuters of Stirling, Dunblane and Alloa?
Stewart Stevenson, you're approaching your last minute.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The member knows perfectly well that we have a an investment programme for the railways in Scotland, which is far in excess of anything south of the border. Indeed, Rail Monthly magazine carried a cartoon in the not-too-distant past which said ScotRail England, because they want our policies south of the border. Now, of course, Labour also focus on education, but they take no responsibility for the £332 million which appears in the budget to cover PPP projects, which essentially were done on their watch. History can speak louder than words, and for Labour it certainly does. On the Cuts Commission, kill the bus pass, lose bus routes. That costs. Charge the oath for prescriptions, increase mortality. That might save in some ways, but I don't think we'd want to unload debt onto students. And of course, for the UK government, today's lending figures, which represent some £87 billion a year in Scottish terms, much more than our budget, are deeply depressing.
Could you conclude, please?
We finally, Presiding Officer, are in a position where we promise it and we deliver it. The SNP does.